There are going to be some massive career changes at the age of 35. There is a really peculiar bad luck line that begins very early on for a short-lived spell, a good few years early on in his life. Immediately, I'm drawn to the early years and his family, and I can see a second family ring here. This is very odd. This other family ring is also very messy, as is his early life here. This is incredibly painful. He is going to buy property in a foreign land at the age of 60. Good. Hello. Thank you all so much for watching. This week I am reading the palms of JHope from BTS. If you'd like to watch any of my other palm readings for all of the other 6 members of BTS, please do check out my playlist. I'm Pisces Palmist, reading the palms of celebrities every Sunday. It's my birthday today. Happy birthday, Pisces people. When I look at a person's palms, some of the things that really stand out straight away are immediately some of the things that require investigation and absolutely revisiting in order to really kind of come to some accurate conclusions. And one of the things that really stands out for me when I look at J Hope's hand is obviously the exceptional length, sensitivity, emotionality, intelligence, creativity to this person. He is quite an analytical person, but more than that, he is an exceptional creative. His left hand headline really differs from his right hand, which shows a development of that creative thinking, an ability, a boldness to kind of say, what if? What if we try this out? Let's give this a go. And, having said that at the same time, there's something contradictory about what I'm saying because his thumb here also shows me, and this is something else that really stood out to me straight away. He has a hesitancy about him. There's a feeling here he can't enact his will. There's a desire for freedom, and he's feeling a bit sort of hemmed in at the moment, backed into a corner. He wishes for freedom and escape. He wants to travel and do his own thing. Maybe this coincides with this massive shift we see at the age of 35 on his career line, where it meets the headline here. Because if you notice, and this is the first thing I mentioned here, I think, the headline here, where it reaches the headline, the fate line, where it travels up and meets the headline here, there is a complete sort of shifting over, a derailing almost, a choosing of a different path. There's a complete changeover of career, massive shift in development of his life path at this time. And do you know what? This is nothing new. I've seen a very, very similar thing with pretty much every member of BTS at the age of around about 35, 36. For all members, there are big changes coming. And this leads me to something of an overall conclusion that there is a big change coming for all members in roughly 4 years' time. It leads me to believe that they are all going to go their separate ways, potentially. Maybe BTS comes to an end in 4 years' time. That's something of a prediction. I'm just gonna pencil that in. He's exceptionally outgoing. The desire here to soak up as much information as possible, more so than any other member. There's something of an outgoing nature to him, but at the same time, there's this kind of shy, cautious, hesitant sort of nature here. The lifeline and the way it's tied to the headline. I think this is actually in psychology. There's always this question: is it nature? Is it nurture? Nature versus nurture? And the answer is always a combination of both. In this case, it's more his environment, it's nurture as to why he is so sensitive, shy and hesitant, overcautious at times. So what I'm seeing, this kind of outgoing front, the way the fingers are sort of fanned out like this, spread out, it shows this outgoing nature, and it also shows a need to soak up as much as the world has to offer. This is a very air hand trait. He's a mixture of both air and water, which makes him quite complex. He is a swirling mass of emotions and an incredible, creative, imaginative, and sensitive. But at the same time, he is highly academic and highly mentally gifted. He has a thirst for knowledge and concept and debate and documentary and travel. The pointed Mercury finger belongs to anyone and everyone who has quite literally a sharp tongue, a silver tongue. He is quite cunning, but he's also very quick-witted. And I suspect I can't see the skin ridge patterns because I just don't have the clarity. But I suspect if he has a loop in his skin ridge patterns just here, he's probably very sarcastic, particularly if it's a diagonal like this. One of the things that really stands out is his sun line and just how strong it is after the age of 53. And this really kind of coincides with the Fates line. And notice how after the age of 35, it's taking a different course. It's moving towards Jupiter, the place of ambition, authority, expertise. Um, it's a place of judgment and decision making. He's going to fall into a place of a higher kind of status, and he's leaning more towards that after 35. It's almost like he becomes a judge of some sort, a mentor, a teacher, a guide. And this really culminates at the age of 53. Notice how it's very faint, but it leans right over in towards Jupiter. And what it does do, and this is really interesting, is it reaches over and touches this ambition line. It was always his ambition to reach the station that he's going to at the age of 53. This is something of a level of honors that he's going to achieve at this time, akin to knighthood in Britain. There's going to be some level of kind of public honors that he receives at this time. And this is why success is, it really for him starts at 53-ish, around that age. And it is more of a feeling because money is not all that interested. He's not interested in, he's not a material person, shall we say. He's not so much interested in securing the future on a practical, material level. Money is not really something like a lot like Tai Hyung. It is not at the top of his priorities. For him, it's all about happiness and loving relationships. A lot like Tai Hyung, in fact. He longs for freedom and happiness, for joy in his life. And if he can secure something of um, a future in knowing that he's going to have that kind of freedom and joy, then he will be happy. And if those around him who he loves are happy, then he will be happy. And this sun line here represents his own happiness and his positivity. He's an extremely he emanates positivity. Now that's not to say that he's all that positive himself. There's something of, you know how the best clowns are always depressed? They make everyone happy around them, but they themselves are actually in a world of melancholia, isolated in their kind of stark awareness. That's what I see here. Unfortunately, I see a lot like Taichung as well, in fact. Some depression here. And I feel like it's environmental, the causes for this, which is why we see this kind of parked thumb, this inward thumb. There's something preventing him environmentally almost from enacting his will, his determination, his ambition. His optimism comes from a place of, it's almost sort of childlike. It's like there's a missing aspect of himself that he's trying to revisit. I mentioned a bad luck line. Now, my mentor's mentor, David Brandon Jones, I highly recommend buying any of his books, by the way. Exceptional palm reader, although he was never all that famous. His he called this line a line of milieu, French word for environment, and essentially there's something very environmental around his life at this time that is causing bad luck. And this line here, it runs alongside the fate line. And what this does is it creates resistance in terms of fortune. And it brushes alongside, it creates this friction, this resistance. And then after it disappears, the moment it disappears, it's like there's an influx of fortune to make up for all that bad luck. It's a really weird thing. It's almost like an ISA of luck that's been taken away from you, and then you get it all back at a certain age. Um, I myself have this. Now, the really interesting thing here is that when you look at maybe it's sort of 15 or so, because the fate line works very differently up until, in terms of timing, up until the age of 35. things it's really, really quick, and then it starts to slow down as it gets up the hand, and that's because of how we think and feel about time as we get older. It's all relative, isn't it? 1 year to an 80-year-old is really not all that long, but to an 8-year-old, it's a very long time. Now, at the age of about 15, you can see on his primary fate line, which stems from very low down on Luna, and looks to have something of a kind of a speck here, a mole, which again suggests potential kind of misfortune early on in life. It looks as though after where we see this line of milieu, this bad luck line, stop, shortly after this, there's this kind of a reaching, a branching away, and it looks to connect to a very, very I don't want to say premature, but this sun line here, it creates the strength for success. So it's almost as though in order for him to have gotten to where he is, he needed to be this unlucky in the first place. It's a really strange thing. It's like he was sent down this very dark into a very dark place, but that place allowed him to find a pot of gold almost. I can't. I'm not really doing a very good job of explaining it here, but without this initial misfortune, he never would have gotten where he is now. And you can actually see at where this begins. It's striking. This is the health line here. This is the Mercury line here, and it stems from this. It's physical. I'm inclined to believe that it's got something to do with his health, but absolutely the way he lived his life. It's at the age of 10 or so, maybe 9, where this begins, and you can see the lump here, just how unfortunate and painful this is. And then you've got this double family ring here, which is really odd. It's like he's got two families. I don't know how else to put it. It doesn't make any sense. One of them just stops dead. His early life is just it's not a very clear image. It's the clearest I've got. It's very chained. It shows emotional disruption, a lacking of emotional development when young, the necessary years for um, receiving love, essentially from our parents. This was lacking, and the next place I'd look for this is a severe sort of gap in between Jupiter and Saturn, just to kind of back this up. And you can see something of a large gap here. That's a lacking of a father figure when young as well. Um, if this is his early years were just dramatically painful. And then when you look at sort of maybe this is, let's say 18, things change tremendously, and he really carves his own independence. Where the lifeline breaks away from the headline is when a person becomes independent, so to speak. And it kind of looks, this sort of looks about that age here. Maybe it's a little bit, maybe this is sort of 16 or so, where this good luck begins for him. There seems to have been a significant struggle in mid-20s in his career. It wasn't plain sailing, his success. And yes, if you look just here, because this is 25, that's about 25, just there. So there are some obstacles here that are kind of close to home. This is rising up towards Saturn, though, strengthening the career. So these are necessary obstacles towards achieving. It's almost like the equivalent to university or something like that. It's a stressful, it's a struggle, it's a stressful time, it's a struggle, but it's a necessary in order to get where he needs to. And you can see at 25, there's just on the lifeline here, there's a blip. Look. It's like something's just a hiccup in the road here, and you can see that corroborated in the fate line just there as well. The color of the lifeline changes at 35. This is odd. I don't really know. That would suggest to me, I would initially think something health-wise. but I don't see anything else to suggest that. But certainly there's a massive career shift moving towards more something that is um, authoritative, decision making. He steps into a role which is on the other side of performance in some way, and I'm wondering if in fact he works on sort of panel shows as potential kind of mentor or judge. There is a feeling of tremendous success at 40. So I wonder if perhaps, I mentioned honors or the equivalent at 53. Maybe it's at 40 that this happens, and that creates the foundation for his rise into a place of authority and expertise. So maybe I was wrong about that. Maybe that occur. I do believe that will occur. But I think it might happen actually a bit sooner, maybe about the age of 40, because when I look closer, I can see the roots. Again, there's a second kind of root here in the strengthening of this success that occurs at 53, tied to this. And again here, just at the end here of it, right, so at 40 things look great, and then a spell of maybe 5 years, things look really good from 40 to 45, and then something happens. It's not quite so good. There's another change here. Um, and there's almost like a sort of a need to protect the career, the path that he's on. I don't think it's anything major, but I feel there's a shifting of priorities, perhaps. Maybe something happens at home. Um, I don't really know. But I will say that I do feel very strongly about this prediction. At the age of 60, he's going to buy property, maybe more than one, abroad, property in a foreign land. Maybe he moves away. There is a distinctive feeling that he has, a lot like Tai Hyung and Jin. He's had many previous past lives. He's lived many times before. With Jin, I got the feeling of, and actually someone mentioned a very similar thing, that he was a king potentially in a past life. I so get that. And I get a similar feeling with JHope as well. There's a really strong feeling of a sense of purpose and drive, absolute, you know, destined to rise to a really high authoritative position. I just love how open-minded J Hope is. The significant space seen between the heart, forgive me, the head and the heart line. It's quite dramatic. He is significantly open-minded, and this is kind of developed because, as I mentioned, his headline, it curves on the right hand, and it doesn't do that so much on the left. It's quite sort of straightforward. It's quite sort of blunt. Blinkered almost, very black and white kind of thinking, very rational, very logical, and actually a little bit more closed off. Notice how there's less of a space here. On the right hand, it's developed into something that far more open, and I feel this is actually um, partly the way he's presenting himself to the outside world is someone who is very sort of open, very giving. Um, but in actual fact, internally, he's a lot more kind of closed off. And I feel that's a lot to do with his upbringing. So there is some inner healing to do, some work, and I feel that this is a lifelong thing because we carry trauma with us from our childhood throughout the entirety of our adult lives. One thing I did notice about J Hope's finger here, it's quite kind of squared off. Jupiter's quite squared off. This shows, let's say, something of an affinity for regulation, for law. He has, as I've mentioned, there's a feeling here, a desire, a drive, an ambition to rise to something of a place of authority and decision making. He is an excellent judge of character, an all-round judge, and in fact, I think he has exceptional decision-making skills. And in this way, this kind of path that he is carving his destiny towards is in some way healing for him. If he's able to land himself in a position where he can make decisions for others, in this way, he's kind of providing in a way that he wasn't able to be provided for. That's generally what we do when we're missing something in our childhood, when we have received some sort of trauma in our childhood. What we do quite often as a way to heal ourselves in adulthood is is to step inside a role where we are able to give in a way that we weren't able to receive. So if he wasn't able to have a father, perhaps he will adopt himself. Perhaps he will give money to charities that support fostering or that sort of thing. I don't see a typically kind of philanthropic heart line. It's not like highly idealistic. There's a strong sense of responsibility, as I mentioned, affinity for law, doing the right thing, regulation, um, and judgment. The heartline reaching right up in between Jupiter and Saturn is a healthy place for it to be. He's got a good sense of right and wrong, but he's not overly idealistic. He's not certainly not materialistic or thinking of himself. His heart's in just the right place, but he probably is liable to getting hurt in relationships. And it absolutely makes sense as to, this is why he's kind of developed some sort of hesitancy, shyness over cautiousness. His sense of responsibility, of duty and contribution is remarkably well developed. All areas of his psychology, his his sense of all areas of his psychology are really well developed. So, considering that he's had such a troubled childhood, he is remarkably healthy psychologically. The only area where he's kind of lacking is Mercury. This desire for freedom, the low set little finger shows insecurity. That's very common. Um, and it kind of leaning away like this, there's a kind of childlike nature here. He is in a way quite childish, but in a very sort of optimistic, and I think a very healthy way, if that makes sense. And I think this is again a way for him to kind of reconnect and re-understand his inner child, something he's missed out on. Again, touching on this kind of he's kind of like that that sad clown who's making everyone happy, but inside he's like a Robin Williams type character. That's someone who I'm getting here. I think internally he's remarkably complex, and he doesn't really let people in. So although his mental health is at this moment in time not great, it's absolutely environmentally caused. The causes of it are due to career, um, the situation that he's in at the moment in his life. I do think he's going to be actually, of all of the members of BTS, the happiest. And I think that happiness really begins for him at 53. I think he's going to be exceptionally happy in the position that he lands himself in. And I do hope that this position of authority, of decision making that he lands himself in, I strongly feel this is actually very closely linked to it. Unfortunately, I don't have the clarity here to talk about relationships or the potential for children. I just don't have the clarity. I can't provide clarity if I don't have it myself. On his family ring, I do see the potential for several children, at least three. I would say, if I'm being completely honest, if I had to provide my estimation, at least two children. Um, but I see the potential for a lot more than that. But I would say he's going to have at least two children. Judging by what we see here, I'm not extremely happy with my prediction there, just because I don't see clarity. There's something really curious that I've just noticed. I've just picked up on. This is the Via Mater, the mother line, and I see this. This is these are sometimes referred to as love lines or friendship lines. It's odd how the two are kind of connected here. The Via Mater ceases here, and then at the same time, where it's kind of pointing to on the lifeline, there's this rise and branching upwards away. towards Apollo, place of happiness. It's odd. It's almost like I don't really know how to interpret this, if I'm being completely honest. But it's almost like he loses his mother and then becomes happier. It's really weird. I have to say, there are several very strange things I see in this hand, and I know they're connected. The double family ring, the bad luck beginning at 9 years old, this mother line that's very small, is very short. There's no love here. Maybe that got something to do with it. Maybe he doesn't like his mother. I don't really know. I don't know what's going on. One thing is for certain, he will be happy, and that happiness starts at 53. And as I say, I do think he will um, gain property at 60. The final thing I'm going to mention here is this little line right here, and it seems to be. I think it's so far off into the future. I don't really see the point in talking about it almost. But some refer to this as a passion line. Some even refer to it as a porn line. I don't subscribe much meaning, in particular, to that last interpretation. I've always pretty much seen this as an inheritance line. It is diagonal, so it's still coursing upwards. There's some positivity, there's some productivity to it, but in another way, it is also an obstacle towards happiness and success. It is both, because when we lose a family member, it's painful, but if they leave us inheritance, it allows us freedom. And actually, freedom is something that JHope really needs. So it is a mixed blessing. It's a mixed curse. And I see that at 65, potentially there is some loss in family and potential inheritance at this time. Do you know, a great deal of J-Hope's life doesn't begin until he's 53. There are other things I've seen in his hands, and I'm not willing to disclose them because I just feel they're too personal. I do hope you have enjoyed this reading. I would like to hear your thoughts and comments about this palm reading, and I also want to know who you would like me to read the palms of next Sunday. You've been giving me lots of suggestions, so I think I'll put a poll up on my posts. Have a look out for that. Please do subscribe and feel free to join as a member. Thank you all so much for watching, and I shall see you on the next one.